Joining me is the country's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan, the Australian, who, by the way, is also an opponent of The Voice. Greg Sheridan, thank you so much indeed for your time. Greg Craven, an advisor to the Prime Minister's referendum group, admits The Voice could stop the government from acting. You've also just heard it then, the co-chair of the group that's designed The Voice, Marcia Langton, saying, well, yes, indeed, that is the plan. That's the power they want. Your reaction?
Well, like you, Andrew, I know and admire Greg Craven, and I've got nothing but good feelings towards Marcia Langton. But here, these two key players in The Voice demonstrate its incoherence and, in reality, its dishonesty. So Greg Craven, among others, told us that any concern about High Court interference in normal government in Australia arising out of The Voice was panic and foolishness and hysteria, and now he shares that concern himself. Marcia Langton, in remarks which directly criticise not Greg Craven, directly contradict rather not Greg Craven, but Anthony Albanese, says yes, she wants Parliament, she wants the government to be compelled to give consideration to the deliberations of The Voice, otherwise it's a toothless tiger. So almost everything that we've been told about The Voice turns out to be either untrue or subject to wild dispute amongst the proponents of The Voice. A little while ago, the Albanese government was answering questions about detail by saying, look at all the detail in the Marcia Langton report. Then it said, no, we don't, we're not bound by the detail in the Marcia Langton report. That has no official status. This is a totally incoherent proposal. I think it's a very bad proposal in principle, but clearly no one now, the opposition, even the opposition, profile and cowardice that it is, could not possibly support this while it contains the provision to be a voice to both the Parliament and to the Executive, because even The Voice's proponents tell us that that means the High Court can interfere with the normal functions of the Australian government on behalf of The Voice.
I think it's just extraordinary. The electorate votes for a government, and then there's a little asterisk. May not be able to act if The Voice says no or hasn't actually spoken, has to wait and wait and wait till The Voice says something. I mean, the whole thing is, I just can't believe this country is considering this seriously. Greg, but onto your foreign affairs beat, I want to raise with you something that disturbs me very much. Now, just last Thursday, I had on this show the Japanese ambassador, Shingo Yamagami, who said to me he was worried about the Albanese government's new rule on gas exports, that these new rules could hurt Japanese investors and hurt Japan's supplies, etc., etc. He's not alone in saying this. Before that, he's also warned against Queensland belting coal exporters to Japan and warned us, Australia, against rising China. He's now announced that after just 2 years in his job here, he's having to go home. Now, reports that I've read suggest the Albanese government wasn't impressed with him, including the way he was getting in the way of us being friendlier to China. Don't know how much truth there is in that. What are you picking up?
Well, I am a tremendous admirer of Shingo Yamagami. He is a fantastic ambassador. He is one of the most successful ambassadors I've ever seen in more than 40 years of journalism, most of it devoted to diplomatic affairs. Now, he talks about, our minerals policy and so on. Well, ambassadors of big countries do that routinely. I mean, he is a perfect lily-livered Girl Scout compared to the way the Chinese embassy has been going on for the last 5 or 6 years. But he's entitled to say, look, changing the rules after an investment is made is damaging commercially. However, I do think within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, there was a lot of unhappiness with his frankness about China. Now, this is a sort of reflexive DFAT position. They were once, years ago, very unhappy with a friend of mine, Rich Armitage, for his frankness about China too. But it is a tremendously good thing for Australian intellectual life, public life, political life to have this strong, bold, vigorous, immensely sophisticated Japanese voice talking to us in realistic terms about the China challenge. He's an ally. If we're ever in trouble, it's people like Shingo who are going to come to our assistance, not the other folks, and his boldness is an asset. And I have no evidence that that DFAT played a role in what seems to be his early recall, but I know that elements of DFAT were very unhappy with him, and I think that reflects poorly on their poor judgment. And, you know, the Albanese government should have regarded him as a tremendous public asset because he helped educate Australians, not least Australian journalists, about the security situation in Asia.
Yes, I don't know. I think we may have to stand by for more information about just what's happened here and whether he was nobbled by forces here. Greg, last week was a bad one for US prestige, I believe. President Biden sent up a jet to shoot down a $17 hobby balloon like this one right out of the sky with a heat-seeking Sidewinder missile worth $500,000. And I guess that really taught a lesson to the Northern Illinois Bottle Cap Balloon Brigade, which reckons the balloon is theirs. And I wouldn't be surprised, though, if China now concludes the US president is a bit of a joke, a bit of a panic merchant, which is not good, when the US Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, had to warn the Chinese Foreign Minister this weekend not to dare now send weapons to Russia to fight in Ukraine. Here he is.
We are very concerned that China is considering providing lethal support to Russia in its aggression against Ukraine. And I made clear that that would have serious consequences in our relationship as well, something that President Biden has shared directly with President Xi on several occasions.
From shooting down $17 balloons to trying to warn China that there could be war if they move or something, repercussions, what on earth is going on?
Well, I think the Biden administration was absolutely right to shoot down the Chinese spy balloon, the first of the sequence of objects that they shot out of their near space. The US doesn't always keep under surveillance near space, but it will from now on. We hardly ever do. So we have no idea if Chinese spy balloons have come over Australia in our near space height. The prospect of China aiding Russia with lethal weaponry is obviously very real, or Anthony Blinken wouldn't have mentioned it publicly. The Americans, it seems to me, over the last couple of years have been intentionally releasing some intelligence in advance of what happens in order to try to stop it from happening. They did that when they said that Russia was certainly going to invade Ukraine. And if China, so, you know, the China apologists in Australia, all the people rejoicing, you know, pathetically over the apparent demise of the Japanese ambassador, they always say that China is, you know, well, Paul Keating insanely describes China as a provider of security. But Blinken would not be warning China about providing lethal aid to Russia if it was not on the brink of doing so. And China's alliance with Russia and approval of Russia's murderous crime against humanity invasion of peaceful democratic Ukraine tells you everything you need to know about modern China. And the other thing that Wang Yi did at that Munich Security Conference is he very explicitly would not rule out China waging a brutal war to subjugate Taiwan. So the folks who think that the Communist Party government of China is a benign influence in our region and in the world simply don't live in the real world. And certainly Paul Keating is one of those. So far, the Albanese government is governing in direct contradiction of Keating, and that's a very good thing.
Well, that's so far so good, but I still have a question mark over the Japanese ambassador, what's happened to him.